Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Path of Exile 2. If you want a build that can delete everything, from mapping and bosses to high-tier Pinnacle Bosses with ease, then this is it. We're back with version 2 of the build, and this time, it's fine-tuned to dominate all content, including Tier 4 Pinnacle Bosses effortlessly. The previous version was already insanely strong for mapping and map bosses, but against the toughest endgame fights, it needed some key adjustments to push even further. So let's not waste any time. Jump in and see what this new version can do. All right, now let's dive into the core of this build, the skills and gems. I've organized them from most important to least, so if you're short on sockets, prioritize the top ones first. Lightning Arrow is the heart of this build. It's your primary clearing skill, and it scales incredibly well with lightning damage and has built-in chain effects for clearing packs. Here's the gem setup. Overcharge. Increases the magnitude of shock, ensuring enemies take maximum lightning damage. Martial Tempo. Boosts your attack speed by 25%, so more speed and DPS. Primal Armament. Adds 25% more elemental damage, pushing your DPS to insane levels. Lightning Infusion. Another 25% bonus to lightning damage, making every arrow hit like a truck. Innervate grants a conditional 35% lightning damage boost, which is always active thanks to our consistent shocking effects. With this setup, Lightning Arrow becomes an unstoppable force, melting everything in its path. But we're just getting started. Next up is Lightning Rod, a skill that's incredibly versatile for both clearing and boss fights. Here's the gem setup. Conduction guarantees 100% shock uptime, ensuring enemies are always vulnerable. Coursing Current spreads the shock effect to nearby enemies, making it perfect for clearing dense packs. Close Combat provides extra damage for close-range targets, making it deadly in tight situations, and for boss fights is a key. Lightning Mastery adds even more lightning damage because why not? Concentrated Effect boosts area damage for clearing waves of enemies. For boss fights, Lightning Rod is a game changer. It helps start the chain loop and sets up Orb of Storms for insane damage. I will also move to the boss setup in the next section. Now, let's talk about Herald of Thunder, a self-triggering skill that activates whenever you kill a shocked enemy, which, let's be honest, is all the time. Here's the gem setup. Electrocute triggers Electrocution, which stop mobs for 5 seconds. Elemental Focus adds crazy damage. Don't worry, it don't interfere with Electrocute. Longshot increases damage for far targets, making it perfect for sniping enemies from a distance. Ambush adds critical strike chance for free, making every hit even deadlier. Inevitable Critical ensures your critical strikes hit hard and consistently. And here's a new addition to the build, Voltaic Mark. This skill is primarily used for boss fights to make them more vulnerable to shock and lightning damage. And here's what we used. Lightning Penetration reduces enemy lightning resistance. Lightning Exposure debuffs enemies with negative lightning resistance, further amplifying your damage. Neural Overload, optional for mapping, if you will even need to use it, or maybe just to enjoy the Nova Explosion for clearing packs. Voltaic Mark is a game changer for boss fights, ensuring they melt even faster under your lightning damage. Next up is Orb of Storms, a skill reserved exclusively for boss fights. Here's the gem setup. Chain makes the orb hit multiple times, maximizing damage. Overabundance allows 2 orbs instead of 1, doubling your damage output. Persistence keeps the orb active longer, covering the entire boss fight. Arcane Tempo speeds up orb placement, ensuring you're always there until you finish the boss. Magnified Effect, new to this build, increases the area of effect, making it even more effective. Orb of Storms is a destructive tool for boss fights, chaining lightning damage and ensuring the boss doesn't stand a chance. Now let's talk about staying alive. Even the most broken builds need solid defenses, and this one is no exception. Here's what we're using. Wind Dancer massively boosts evasion, and when you do get hit, you counterattack hard. To enhance this, we use Maim, which mimes enemies for slowing them and reduce their evasion. Blind lowers their chance to hit us and their evasion as well. Pin to start pin buildup. Now, let's move to Grim Feast. Generates a ton of energy shield during mapping, giving you an extra layer of defense. Then we have Ghost Dance. Regenerates energy shield when you get hit, giving you another layer of survivability. Switch between Ghost Dance and Grim Feast depending on the situation. For mapping, Grim Feast is your go-to, while Ghost Dance shines in boss fights if you got hit. And don't forget to use Clarity. Put it in the one you are using to help with mana regeneration. Now, let's talk about the boss setup. This is where the build truly shines. With a few quick gem swaps and skill adjustments, you'll be deleting bosses before they even get a chance to fight back. Here's exactly what you need to do. First, we're going to make some quick gem swaps to optimize our damage for boss fights. Replace Electrocute and Elemental Focus from Herald of Thunder with Conduction and Coursing Current from Lightning Rod. This ensures maximum damage and spreads the Electrocute effect to the boss, making them more vulnerable and stuck for 5 seconds to finish them. Next, replace Lightning Mastery from Lightning Rod with Primal Armament from Lightning Arrow. This boosts your elemental damage even further, turning Lightning Rod into an unstoppable powerhouse. These swaps take just few seconds, and they make a huge difference in your boss killing potential. Here's the perfect skill rotation for boss fights. Start by placing Orb of Storms near the boss. This skill chains lightning damage and synergizes perfectly with Lightning Rod. Together, they'll melt the boss in seconds. Drop Lightning Rod. Place it around the boss to start the shock loop and deal massive damage over time. Cast Voltaic Mark. Use this skill to debuff the boss, reducing their lightning resistance and making them more vulnerable to your damage. Spam Lightning Arrow and Lightning Rod. Keep firing Lightning Arrow, deal consistent damage. Use Lightning Rod on to maintain the loop and keep the pressure on. This rotation ensures the boss is constantly taking massive damage from multiple sources. For extra security, switch to Ghost Dance if you're facing a particularly dangerous boss. This skill regenerates your energy shield when you take hit, so it gives you additional opportunity. So, why does this setup work so well? Here's how it all comes together. Firstly, Electrocution effect. When you hit the boss with Lightning Rod and Orb of Storms, they start buildup, and we are going to support that. Then they become electrocuted for 5 seconds. This is your golden window to unleash everything you've got. And with some passive nodes we will do, your damage during this 5-second window will become absolutely insane. In short, this setup turns the boss into a sitting duck for 5 seconds. And with your fully optimized DPS, that's more than enough time to delete them from existence. Now that we've covered the skills and boss setup, let's dive into the passive tree and Ascendancy. This is where we fine-tune the build to maximize damage, survivability, and synergy with our skills. I'll guide you step by step so you know exactly where to allocate your points. By the way, I've added max roll and POE links in the description below so you can easily follow along and plan your passive tree. And before we continue, if you liked this video and found it useful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. First, let's talk about the Ascendancy. For this build, we're using the Ranger's Deadeye Ascendancy. Here's the order in which you should take the nodes. Gathering Winds. This is your first major node, and it's a game changer. It grants Tailwind, which boosts your movement speed, attack speed, and evasion. Since you're always using skills, Tailwind is always active, making you faster and deadlier. Wind Ward. This node gives you damage reduction based on your Tailwind stacks. With 10 Tailwind stacks, you're getting a massive survivability boost, which is crucial for both mapping and boss fights. Far Shot. This node increases your damage the farther your arrows travel. Since you're a ranged build, this means you're dealing insane damage before enemies even get close to you. Endless Munitions. This node adds an extra projectile to all your skills. Now, let's break down the passive tree. I'll guide you through the most important nodes in order and explain why they're essential for this build. Honed Instincts, providing projectile speed, which will turn to bow damage soon, and dex. Next, we have Vile Wounds, which grants a 33% increased damage boost against enemies affected by elemental ailments. Since we're constantly applying shock and electrocute, this buff is always active in both mapping and boss fights. Even though it doesn't directly show in your DPS tooltip, it's a massive hidden damage boost that makes everything melt even faster. Quiver effects and master fletching. These nodes are crucial because they scale your Quiver's stats, which are amplified by your Widowhail bow. Prioritize these to maximize your damage. By the way, keep intelligence nodes all the way. Just grab enough strength to cover your gear and skill requirements, then focus on intelligence. These keep your mana pool stable while scaling intelligence, which benefits your lightning damage. Thunderstruck. This node is insane for our build. It creates a perfect loop. When you shock an enemy, you have a 50% chance to electrocute them. And when you electrocute them, you have a 50% chance to shock them again. This synergy works perfectly with our lightning-focused skills. Subterfuge Mask. This node is a game changer for defense. It lets you fully utilize an energy shield helmet, giving you even more evasion and survivability. Electrotherapy to support our electrocute buildup, in addition to skill speed. Falcon Technique. This scales beautifully with your dexterity, boosting both your damage and attack speed. Enhanced reflexes, more evasion, more survivability, and solid dexterity scaling. Coming Calamity. This node grants 50% increased lightning damage, which is absolutely insane for your DPS. Next, we're using Controlled Metamorphosis Diamond to catch Falcon Dive, which scales perfectly with accuracy, something we already get naturally from dexterity. Combined with Feathered Fletching, this setup becomes insane, converting projectile speed into raw bow damage, making our attacks even deadlier. Electrocution pushes 20% more damage to enemies we electrocute, making it a huge DPS boost. And after that, Catch Acceleration, more movement and skill speed, and let's take our way up to Wildstorm. Scales lightning damage even further, ensuring your skills hit like a truck. Chaos, Inoculation, and Eternal Youth. These nodes completely remove the chaos damage threat and makes you recharge energy shield using the life flasks. Now we go to Patient Barrier and Raw Mana. Push your energy shield and mana even higher for survivability and sustain. Now it's the time for the Power Spike. Against the Darkness Gem. Activate this for 4% lightning damage and any resistance type you need. Circle nodes start with Kite Runner, Storm Surge, Sharp Sight, Staggering Palm, and Unbound Forces for even more damage and utility. Mana nodes. If you need more mana, push Siphon and Mental Toughness. Pure Power in Amulet. This is a must. It scales your raw lightning damage massively based on intelligence, and we fully abuse this in the build. And for diamonds, when selecting a diamond, prioritize these key attributes for maximum damage scaling. Lightning damage, attack speed, damage with bows, attack speed with bows, and bonuses gained from equipped Quiver. These will significantly enhance your overall DPS and attack efficiency. And if you have extra budget, go for a Megalomaniac Diamond with Crushing Verdict and any other strong passive you can find. This will further amplify your build's power, making it even deadlier. These nodes are the backbone of your build, ensuring you have the damage, survivability, and synergy needed to dominate Path of Exile 2. Now that we've covered the skills, boss setup, and passive tree, let's talk about gearing. This is where we push the build to its absolute limit. I'll break down the best items for this build, including budget-friendly options and endgame upgrades. Here's what you need to know. For armor, we're using Morior Invictus, an absolute game changer. It boosts attributes, scaling intelligence, dexterity, and strength for higher DPS while making gear and skill requirements effortless. Each socket also grants elemental resistances, so we no longer need to worry about resistances on other gear. With 5 sockets, or 4 if you're on a budget, this armor provides massive survivability and damage, all at an affordable price nowadays. For the Quiver, we're going with +2 levels to skills, a massive upgrade that scales all your lightning abilities for even more damage. Key stats to look for include projectile speed, boost bow damage thanks to feathered fletching, making attacks faster and deadlier. Lightning damage to attacks, melts everything on screen. Dexterity, scales with the bow, increasing both damage and attack speed. Since this Quiver can drain mana quickly, sustain it through rings and passive nodes like Siphon and Mental Toughness. Prioritize +2 levels to skills, lightning damage to attacks, and dexterity first for the biggest impact. This Quiver is the core of our build. It takes it from strong to absolutely broken. Here's an optional, but good to have a low-level Mason Shield with Leap Slam skill. This skill is perfect for mobility. When you need to escape dangerous situations, it gives you an extra layer of mobility and positioning control. It's especially useful for the final boss fight or when you're surrounded by enemies. You can skip this if you have issue with strength, but any low-level mace to activate the skill is enough. For the amulet, we're using the Everlasting Gaze Azure. This is the best option for the build right now because it solves mana regeneration issues and push scaling energy shield with mana, which already scale from the intelligence. And since we've allocated Wildstorm in the passive tree, which is near our other key nodes, we need to allocate pure power here to save some nodes from the road. If you're on a budget, this amulet is perfect, is the best choice for this build, but for budget-friendly alternatives. Use a rare amulet with energy shield, intelligence, and resistances. For gloves, we're using Hands of Wisdom and Action. They're extremely cheap right now and perfectly scale all our attributes into attack damage. Exactly what this build needs for maximum efficiency. For the rest of your gear, here's what to look for. Helmet, high energy shield based with intelligence and resistances. This works perfectly with Subterfuge Mask from the passive tree, boosting evasion. And if you're stable, go for rarity. Boots, energy shield boots with movement speed 30 to 35, intelligence and resistances. Same rule, if you're comfortable, add rarity. Rings, focus on lightning damage to attacks, mana regeneration, intelligence, and dexterity. These help sustain mana, boost damage, and cover any missing resistances, and same thing for rarity. And for the belt, a utility belt is ideal to enhance your ring's stats and improve overall scaling, and also can find cheap ones. And the last piece in the puzzle is the Widowhail Bow, with the max bonuses you can afford, and for the sockets add elemental damage with attacks, and this bow will scale our Quiver states crazy. If you're on a budget, don't worry. This build still works with affordable gear. Here are some alternatives. For the armor, use a high evasion rare chest with resistances and dex. Grab the Spectral Ward passive. This will convert evasion into energy shield, keeping your defense strong without breaking your budget. And for the amulet, use a rare amulet with energy shield, mana intelligence, and resistances. As you earn more currency, you can upgrade to the endgame gear I mentioned earlier. Now, let's talk about defense, because even with insane DPS, you need to stay alive. This build has multiple layers of protection, making you incredibly hard to kill. Our first layer of defense is pure offense. With the sheer amount of damage this build outputs, most enemies won't even get the chance to fight back. Everything melts before it can become a threat, making this one of the safest playstyles available. Next, we have evasion. We maintain around 80% evasion, which is still solid despite shifting to an energy shield-based setup. This allows us to naturally avoid attacks and stay mobile, reducing incoming damage before it even reaches us. Our third layer is energy shield. We start with a base of 3.4k, but with Grim Feast, this jumps to around 6.5k in maps. This provides a massive buffer, ensuring that even when we do get hit, we can quickly recover and keep fighting. On top of that, we are completely immune to chaos damage. This means eliminating one of the biggest dangers in high-tier content. Next, we have elemental resistances. With around 70% resistance to all elements, we gain an extra layer of protection against elemental damage, further enhancing our survivability. Finally, we use the Charm of the Chemist, which grants complete immunity to freeze. This prevents us from getting locked down in fights, ensuring that we can always stay mobile and in control of the battle. For mana sustain, we push the most in rings. But if you find yourself running out of mana, make sure to pick up passive nodes like Siphon and Mental Toughness. These will keep your mana regeneration stable, allowing you to attack freely without running out of mana. For an extra layer of security, you can also use the Melting Maelstrom Ultimate Flask. This will help in long fights and high-tier bosses. And that's everything you need to know about the Destruction Ranger build. If you enjoyed this guide, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Path of Exile 2 content, guides, and gameplay. If you have any questions or suggestions, drop a comment below. I read and reply to all of them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.